Hello Internet, says Skorkowski, and welcome to part 7 of our review/game diary for the Pulp Cthulhu campaign, The Two-Headed Serpent. Today's exciting installment will take us to Calcutta, where our heroes won't face just one faction bent on world destruction, but 3. The chapter is 21 pages long, and depending on what the player characters have done up to this point, means that the scenario could go a lot of different ways from this point going forward. And also, what choices they make during this scenario can actually greatly affect how the entire campaign itself ends. Now what he means here is at least one of the major factions of villains ain't gonna be surviving this chapter. Now the question the player's gotta answer is, which one? Shh, spoilers, man! For this episode, our heroes are going to be Buckmeyer, Jane Darling, Boba, and JJ, who all just returned from the Belgian Congo. Now, before we continue, I must warn you that there will be spoilers galore. So any players out there, if you have any interest of ever playing this campaign, please stop now. But definitely send your game masters this way to see if this campaign would be right for you. Okay, keepers, let's dive in. We have a lot to unpack this episode. When we last left our heroes, Buck and JJ had just returned from the Belgian Congo and were desperate to get a good shower and a sleep in a bed. However, once they arrived at the apartment, they discovered a note on the door from Philip Connors instructing them not to go inside the apartment and to call Connors at once. Now, Buck accepted this at face value, but JJ, wanting to know why he couldn't go inside, and also wanted to get to all the sweet, sweet stuff that was inside the apartment, decided to open the door, and there he discovered a bomb. Being a demolitions expert, he carefully defused the bomb, preventing it from going off. Worried about what fate might be awaiting Jane, they tried to call her apartment, but no one answered. And terrified something might have befallen her, they raced to her place to save the day. Meanwhile, Boba tried contacting his mafia family, but learned that after the attempted bombing of Caduceus headquarters, the entire gang was wiped out only days later. Unsure what to do, he rented a seedy hotel and decided to contact the player characters the following morning. Jane returned to her apartment and was met with a strange smell. Since so much of the serpent person technology relies on the technology being able to smell the serpent person pheromones, I decided that now that Jane was a full serpent person, she should be able to smell other serpent people in the area, and if she had had a lot of experience encountering that smell, would be able to recognize who they are. A light flipped on to reveal Frank DeLuca sitting in a chair with a silenced pistol. Because Jane was now wearing the likeness of an Oklahoma farm girl, he didn't recognize her and asked her who she was. Me? I'm your replacement. I'm gonna take it over from here and, I am bombing this fast talk roll, aren't I? And who the hell is calling me at this time of night? Not believing the lie, DeLuca attacked, and what followed was an epic brawl of guns, fangs, and some Jackie Chan-style martial arts. And once the dust was settled and every piece of furniture in the apartment was destroyed, Frank DeLuca was dead. Jane, we rushed right over here just to tell you that you're in danger. Yeah, thanks for the warning. After a ridiculously long amount of time of the players trying to figure out what to do next, they finally remembered that Frank Connors' note that Buck had found on his door had clearly instructed for them to call Connors. Once they did, Connors was very happy to hear from them, saying that everything in the home office had been going crazy after the bomb threat at Caduceus. Meadham and Dr. G had been cleared out, moving most of the operations to the Meadham estate. People were going missing, and Frank DeLuca was getting even more paranoid than normal. Yeah, that might have something to do with the massive amount of cocaine that we found on him and when we checked his apartment. The next morning after Boba arrived, they decided to meet with Connors at a street-side cafe. It was a very good call on the player's part to let Jane kind of hide out across the street doing lookout, because Connors made sure that he looked at all the player characters' shadows before speaking to them, because Connors was now terribly paranoid of serpent people. He told them that he believed Caduceus might actually be up to no good, and provided the player characters with the rest of the New York handouts that they had missed, as well as a copy of the Relaya text which he had stolen when they were clearing out Meadham's office when he decided to move. He told the player characters to watch their backs and gave them information on how to contact him and said that he was at their disposal. Once that was done, Jane called the number that Rose Meadham had given her back in Iceland and left a message saying that Jane was ready to talk and see what Rose might might have in mind for. Unsure what to do next, the player characters drove out to Connecticut. After taking care of the guards, they discovered the Temple of Yig, the living statues of those exposed to Gatanathoa, but the estate had already been evacuated, and a large number of serpent people who had obviously been living there had evidently gone, and clues pointed that they might have gone to Brazil.
Damn, this feels like a dead end to me, guys. Let's get back to New York and back to the adventure. I am sure there's going to be no dead ends there.
Returning to New York, they were contacted by Connors, who was asking them if they had read the paper. The Cobra Crown had been discovered in Calcutta, and Joshua Meadham was already on his way to go get it. Connors secured the heroes a Caduceus plane, and the heroes left at once to stop Joshua Meadham. Also at this time, Jane received a message back from Rose Meadham saying that she too was in Calcutta, and told Rose to go ahead and meet her at the Fairlawn Hotel where she was staying. This here is the actual beginning of the scenario. The chapter is going to bring all three factions into the same place: Caduceus, Rose with the Inner Knight, and Tyrannish. The goal is that at least one, preferably two of these factions are going to be killed before the scenario is done, and the surviving faction becoming the final enemy for the campaign. Now, I had already decided that I was going to take out Tyrannish during the chapter. She wasn't used much in our campaign, and the player characters really hadn't interacted with her, so I didn't think she deserved to become the final villain. So the question really came down to as if it was going to be Joshua Meadham or Rose Meadham that the player characters were also going to kill. Now, the chapter itself is a bit busy with a backstory that to me is a little bit overcomplicated and a lot of plot threads that the player characters can follow. Most of what's offered in this scenario is just completely optional, and it really depends on what the player characters do either before they go to Calcutta or once they arrive in Calcutta. The short of it is that Tulsidas Vikmaji and his associate discovered the Cobra Crown in India. They were supposed to sell it to Rose Meadham originally, but decided to shop it around to see if they could get a better price. This tipped off Tyrannish and led to an overenthusiastic curator releasing the newspaper article that then tipped off Joshua Meadham that the Cobra Crown was found, which also tipped off the player characters that the Cobra Crown was found, and now everybody is racing to the same city in order to get the crown. Now, shortly before the heroes arrived, Vikmaji's business associate met with Rose Meadham and tried to sell her a fake crown. She quickly saw through the bogus crown, and then he raced out to escape for his life, but was then hit and killed by a truck. The module provides both a keeper and a player map of the city, with several points of interest marked on each. Now, there is an optional opening to this scenario where the player characters arrive just in time to see Vikmaji's business partner killed when he's hit by the truck, which leads to a subplot involving a crooked policeman who found the bogus Cobra Crown and is trying to sell it. But I decided that would all just make the scenario even more confusing, so I opted not to use this optional opening. The actual opening scene for this scenario is when the player characters arrive at the Grand Hotel, or whichever hotel it is they decide to stay at. Once they get there, they're going to spot Rose Meadham sitting in a car and then two of her goons entering the hotel. These two goons are going to go up to Vikmaji's room and then force their way inside. Vikmaji's going to jump out of his window, and it's going to lead these two goons on a merry chase across the city, hopefully with the player characters joining in. So you've got Vikmaji in the front, and then two serpent person goons, and then the heroes, and they're going through all these wonderful obstacles through Calcutta. But my player characters didn't feel compelled at all to join in this chase for no reason. They didn't know who this guy was that they were chasing, and they didn't really feel that there was any need for them to get involved. Though they did catch the Serpent People goons, and they fought them, and then Buck decided to go ahead and chase the stranger that was running in the street, but he really only made it about half a block before he got hit by traffic in the street and nearly killed. However, what I decided to do here is that I added the clues that were available in the optional ending. Those were now spread around Vikmaji's room, and the player characters discovered all this before they made a quick exit and decided to check into a different hotel. Once they're all checked into a new hotel, the next stop they gave is to the Museum of India, but they then discovered that the newspaper article that they had read had been released in error, and the museum curator who had released the information that went into the newspaper had not reported into work that day. Wanting to know more about the Cobra Crown and what the nature of this erroneous release was, they decided to visit the curator's house. But there they discovered that the curator and his entire family had been brutally murdered. There was also an empty vial of serpent person control serum, revealing that one of the enemies was involved in this murder. Now, one thing that I do suggest here is that keepers maybe add a concrete clue that it was actually Joshua Meadham and Mr. Canning who had murdered the curator's family and actually eaten his baby as well. So one way you could do that is if early on, when you introduce Joshua Meadham, if you give him something like some telltale cigarettes, like some custom cigarettes that he has that have 3 or 4 gold bands on them that he's always smoking, or maybe some sort of very obvious type of cigars that he likes to favor, and you could put those in the ashtray there, really just to cement in their head, out of all the serpent person factions, it was definitely Meadham who had done this murder. Searching the crime scene, the player characters also discovered a business card for Reginald Asquith of the British Museum. Now, the module has it where Asquith is not in town. The player characters could call him in London and be able to discuss some information with them over the phone. However, because the scenario had been a little bit rocky for us so far, I decided to go ahead and have Asquith be a character in Calcutta that the player characters could meet with. So they quickly discovered that he was there, he was hoping to purchase the Cobra Crown, and he was staying at the Great Eastern Hotel.
Okay guys, this dude that we want to talk to is staying at the exact same hotel as Joshua Meadham, so we better play this one smart if we want to avoid bumping into him.
Cranking up the charm and using her skills as a grifter, Jane arranged to meet with Asquith at the hotel restaurant in order to find out more about the crown. He quickly told her Vikmaji's name and told her that Vikmaji had actually called him that morning, desperately offering to sell him the Cobra Crown, but he insisted that it only be in cash. Meanwhile, Boba had placed himself at another part of the restaurant in order to listen in and keep an eye on her and keep Jane safe. Buck and JJ decided to take position somewhere inconspicuous in the hotel lobby, but they failed their roles hilariously bad. Joshua Meadham and Canning came strolling into the hotel. Neither of them recognized Boba or Jane in their new likenesses, but both clearly saw Buck and JJ just sitting in the hotel lobby.
Oh, hey boss, fancy meeting you here. Now I know we're not going to have any problems now since we're in such a big public place, so why don't we just talk? Oh my God, he's charging me!
What happened next is a wild fight of Canning battling Buck and JJ, and Jane wanting to keep Asquith safe and also knowing that if she took any damage it was going to reveal her to be a serpent person, she quickly grabbed Asquith and escorted him safely out of the hotel. Meanwhile, Boba kicked over the table, pulled out his twin .45s, and proceeded to shoot the hell out of Joshua Meadham. The attack was so devastating that Meadham grabbed just a random person that was running past him and using the Lookout Master luck ability was able to use this guy as a human shield to absorb all these bullets and be able to survive that fight a little bit longer. After the battle had pretty much destroyed the entire lobby of the hotel, Joshua Meadham and Mr. Canning were left dead, their true forms as serpent people now visible to the entire world.
Consider this my resignation.
Taking the opportunity during the confusion after this hotel fight, the player characters took Joshua Meadham's hotel key and they ran up to his room where they quickly discovered 2 vials of control serum as well as a briefcase containing $50,000 that was intended to purchase the Cobra Crown.
Holy crap, guys! This is the best severance package ever!
They also discovered a Haftarang device, the Mythos-powered nuclear bomb that they had first encountered in North Borneo. Now, the module has it to where the Haftarang device is something that the player characters would get from Rose Meadham. However, because Joshua Meadham was now dead, I decided that Rose Meadham, who was frustrated she couldn't get the Cobra Crown, and had already left Brazil for the finale of the campaign. And because I couldn't guarantee that the player characters were then going to go to a hotel room and check it out where they could find the Haftarang device, I went ahead and added it here because the player characters are going to need this device for the campaign finale.
Well, I am not one to look a gift nuke in the mouth, so we are definitely holding on to this bad boy.
They then stole the keys to Meadham's sweet Rolls Royce and drove it out to the airport where they then went through Meadham's private Caduceus plane. In there, they discovered several charts showing that the plane was going to be leaving Calcutta and going to Brazil, as well as some more information about what the plan was when they reached Mu, including some information that in the Citadel of Mu was technology that could be used to reverse the hybridization process.
Holy crap, there's a cure? Guys, we have got to get to Mu. I want my luxuriously soft skin again.
The next morning, the player characters met with Asquith again, and this time using the control serum, had Asquith contact Vigmaji and tell him that he was willing to purchase the Cobra Crown for $50,000. Vigmaji was very hesitant to actually come to Asquith's hotel room, but eventually he gave in because he was desperate to leave Calcutta. Once he arrived and saw the player characters, he tried to flee, but JJ chased him down and dragged him back to the hotel room, where they also gave him some control serum, and Vigmaji revealed that he did not actually have the Cobra Crown, but was able to tell them that the crown is currently located at a small temple at the other side of town. Racing across town, the player characters arrived at the temple to discover mangled bodies and corpses everywhere, and some clues involved said that Tyrannish had just beaten them to the temple and she had already stolen the Cobra Crown.
Guys, this is just another dead end. I say we go back to the airport and head on over to that Snake Island place in Brazil.
Disappointed that they had missed the crown, the player characters decided to go back to the airport and fly to Brazil to see what Meadham was up to. But on their way, they encountered this huge crowd that was moving into a square, and then in the sky above the square they saw swirling lights and this big mass of a portal opening up in the sky. Deciding to check it out, the player characters tried to get their car closer, but there were too many people in the way, so they had to park their car and go up to the top of a building overlooking the square. On the far side of the square, they could see Tyrannish, now wearing the Cobra Crown, and as the crowd started pressing closer and closer toward her, they began melting, their bodies merging into a hideous mass. Buck took one look at this and went completely insane. Fleeing, he raced to his car, hoping to get away. Then the mass of people transformed into 5 Loigors, the sight of that driving Boba insane. But instead of fleeing, Boba got a crazy idea. An idea that also awakened in the new insane talent of insane firearms skill. He raced back to the car where Buck was just now coming out of his bout of madness. He jumped down onto the car under the hood, and he looked at Buck and he said,
"You drive straight at those things and I'm gonna shoot them."
"You got it." Meanwhile, JJ started laying fire from the rooftop with his Lewis gun, and Jane raced across the rooftops to get Tyrannish, but proceeded to then fail every jump and climb roll that she attempted. Now this fight was intense. The Loigor, when they die, will explode for 1d100 points of damage, and that explosion has a 5-yard range. So when the first one died, they were still really close together, and it hurt the ones on either side of it before they ended up spreading around. But meanwhile... Now, I don't even know how they actually pulled this one off. I watched all the rolls, and Buck made a ton of wonderful drive rolls as he was circling around the square, trying to dodge explosions and the swipes from monsters, and he didn't fail a single one. Meanwhile, Boba, who was on the hood of the car, was firing this gun, making all the dex checks as the car is swerving around and doing all sorts of crazy stuff like that, and they managed to pull this one off in what became the most epic and amazing pulp combat that we have ever had. Eventually, the beasts and Tyrannish were killed. Grabbing the Cobra Crown, the heroes hightailed it back to the plane and began flying to Brazil, ending the Calcutta adventure. Now overall, this chapter was very hit or miss with us. We did have some great moments and one hell of a memorable epic ending. That combat was the best combat in the entire campaign. However, because this adventure is so much investigation and it has a large cast, and so much of that cast is actually already dead before the big game actually begins, the player characters never even get to meet them, it can be a little bit confusing and a little bit frustrating for your players. Aside from the opening scene where the player characters are just going to be assumed that they're going to get in this chase, kind of chasing down 2 goons and some random guy that they've never met before, the rest of the adventure is very open because of what they could possibly do. And because the adventure does provide a lot of different hooks and ideas and suggestions as far as what they could do, most of that information is never going to be used. The problem, though, is that game masters are going to be reading this all, trying to commit this all to memory, while most of it's not going to get used, and most of what's going to happen in this adventure is probably going to be completely improvised by them. So you have the issue of game masters going to prepare a lot of information, but 90% of it might not be used at all. Now, personally, I do like the optional ending that they gave, or maybe the player characters have a fist fight with Mr. Canning on the top of a moving plane. That sounded epic as hell, and it didn't work out for us, but I really hope somebody tries that and they have a lot of fun with it. Now, going into this chapter, I already had figured out that this was going to be the hardest scenario in the whole campaign to run, and it definitely was. To me, it just felt that they threw in too many plot ideas and plot hooks, that it was just quickly became overwhelming and confusing, and so much backplot was involved, and so many of the parts of it require that the player characters show up at a scene after the fact, and that can lead to a little bit of frustration and confusion for the players.
Oh yeah, I mean, first we get to Calcutta, and that one guy's already been hit by a truck. And then we get to the hotel, and that one guy's already jumping out the window. So then we get to the museum, and that one guy didn't even show up to work that day. So then we go to his house, and we find out that he and his family are already dead. So finally we make it to the temple and find out that the crown has already been stolen. So much of this adventure was really us just showing up somewhere to find out that all the excitement had already passed. Now that can be a lot of fun to do in a short burst, but over the course of an entire session, that really started wearing us down.
So while yes, we did have a lot of fun at the very end of this scenario, which left us all feeling pumped for the next adventure, getting to that point was kind of rough and very difficult and rocky for us to do. Calcutta, in my opinion, is the hardest scenario in the entire Pulp Cthulhu campaign to run because it is so loose, so game masters definitely be warned about that. Now that being said, the next two adventures in the campaign do not drag at all, as we actually just start racing straight towards the great finale. So join us next episode as we discover what Caduceus is up to in Brazil with Chapter 8, Snake Island.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of this series or some of our other videos, such as RPG reviews or Game Master Toolbox, just hit that little subscribe button. Till next time, heroes, you have a great day. You know, that is a serious flight to get from India to Brazil. Are you sure that Jane can stay awake for all of that?
Yeah! Buckle your seatbelts, boys. This is about to be one hell of a flight.